Hey guys, Ryan Sprague here from Somewhere in the Skies, and I want to tell you about something that feels like it was specifically made for us. Those of us who have followed every UFO headline, every whistleblower, every UFO sighting and close encounter that literally defined the past year in UFOs. And that is Anomalous cards. Anomalous cards are a one-of-a-kind collectible series, capturing the top 100 UAP and UFO stories of 2025. Preserved, documented, and brought to life in a format you can actually hold in your hands. We're talking about 100 uniquely designed trading cards, each one representing a pivotal moment in the unfolding UAP conversation. Every single card is individually serial numbered, making each piece of art a limited historical archive. Not just a collectible, but a timestamp of disclosure in motion. And here's where it gets even more exciting. You can collect the full story your way. Grab a complete factory set and own the entire timeline of 2025. Or dive into the thrill of discovery with cello packs and boxes, each containing the chance to uncover exclusive Heroes of Truth insert cards, spotlighting the individuals pushing this mystery into the light. This isn't just memorabilia, it's a curated record of one of the most important years in UAP history. Head over to letsgetanomalous.com right now to grab your set or packs. And for Somewhere in the Skies listeners, you get an exclusive promo code right now for 15% off your order. That promo code is Somewhere15. Again, go to letsgetanomalous.com and use the promo code Somewhere15 for 15% off your order. Because the UFO story is still unfolding, and now you can collect it all with Anomalous cards.
Spectrovision Radio.
While our government's official position is not to speculate on this subject, we can choose to let our minds explore other possibilities, to use our imaginations. For if we consider that astro-scientists agree on one point, that the possibility of life elsewhere is not only quite probable, some feel it is there without a doubt. Let us suppose then that these objects are real space vehicles, extraterrestrial in origin, and not an illusion of the mind.
This is Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague.
Welcome to Somewhere in the Skies. I am your host, Ryan Sprague, and today we are getting kooky and spooky with author Adam Gorightly and filmmaker Christopher Graybill. And we're going to be talking all about their brand new documentary, Saucers, Spooks and Kooks. Adam and Chris explore the hidden history behind saucers, spooks, and kooks, where disinformation, intelligence figures, and evolving narratives have shaped ufology for decades. From Paul Bennewitz and his descent into madness and secret programs, to Richard Dodie and the spread of the MJ-12 mythos, we examine how these stories took root and expanded far beyond their origins, and left shattered lives in their wake. But this isn't just history, it's a mirror. As modern UAP revelations and new insiders take center stage, we're left to wonder whether we're witnessing progress or the insidious return of something we've seen before. Tonight, we follow those echoes, because where they lead might say more about ufology than we could ever imagine.
Roswell.
Alien bodies, multiple crashed alien spaceships, a government cover-up.
Dulce Base.
It didn't matter what base it was all the battle of underground bases and the aliens are coming in and all this really out there fringe areas.
This is such a crazy ass story, my God.
Paul Bennewitz was a scientist. He started noticing that there were lights doing strange things.
These things lit up like balls of bright light and just took off. Came up, went south, around the end of the mountains, gone. Who are they?
Yep, it's got to be aliens. We don't know what else it could be. We're going like, wow.
They decided to just encourage him with the outlandish ideas. One, because the only people that would listen would be crazy UFO people and foreign agents.
Spooks or Kooks.
We got Richard Dodie apparently purposely misleading Bennewitz and for whatever purposes, which could be counterintelligence to confuse Russians.
More, to me, he was completely sold on Bennewitz. And Bennewitz, at that point, had become the paranoid.
Man, it's like, what a gut punch. Everybody in that room, including Stan Friedman, had basically been played by Bill.
I guess these days it would be more like that New York Times article. It just comes out of nowhere and just bang. Somebody's making an effort to push it through in the way that people accept information.
And how they're using UFOs to potentially cover for an intelligence kind of gathering, psychological warfare. And it's such a great freaking cover story.
If someone like Paul Bennewitz and it's already there, you just let them do the work.
Saucers, spooks, and kooks.
Adam and Chris, welcome for the very first time. I can't believe I'm saying that to Somewhere in the Skies, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. Now, the reason I wanted to have you guys on today, and I'm going to be upfront, I was just listening to a wonderful interview that our good buddy and colleague Steve Berg did with you guys about the book and documentary we're going to be talking about today. And Steve made a really good point. I think both of these, the book and the documentary, came at the perfect time for ufology and what we're going through today, which we will be discussing. But before we get to that, I want to start with you, Adam, if you don't mind, because the book came first. I've got my copy right here behind me. I've got a couple copies, actually.
Oh, nice.
I believe I got an advanced one, too, at some point. The perks, I guess, of being a podcaster in this space. Mm-hmm. But Adam, the title is Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, UFO Disinformation in the Age of Aquarius. Loved it. Couldn't put it down. But what is kind of, I guess, your origin story? Before we even get into the book itself, like, when did you first get interested in UFOs? Give us the Peter Parker moment, I guess, for you, Adam.
In the 70s, as a teenager, I started getting exposed to stuff and was very interested. During that period, you had the Chariots of the Gods and all the paperbacks you'd see at the supermarket, intrigued. And, it was the age of In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. I was exposed to a lot of stuff there, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So, I was getting steeped in that. Then I had a psychedelic UFO experience in 1978 that kind of blew my mind and set me on this trajectory of UFO research and getting involved in the field. So, that's it in a nutshell.
Hey, that is an awesome nutshell to be in, my friend. A psychedelic UFO experience. Is that something you can kind of share with us? Like, what was that experience like? If you want to go there, it's up to you.
Oh, yeah, I can share. I've told the story a lot of times, but I'll try to put this in a nutshell too. Myself and a friend, this was in lovely Fresno, California. Try to remember, it was 78 or 79. It must have been 1978. And we were at a party and we dropped some acid, as we were wont to do during those years. And the walls started closing in. The party was getting too intense. Let's get out of here. I was with a buddy of mine, Joe, and we've always had a simpatico, wrote music together, had a kind of telepathic thing going. had that kind of rapport. So we take off. We're walking through Septembryo, and we say, let's go to the ditch bank. We can kind of get away from the houses and stuff, out to the levee area. Before we got to the levee, I remarked, what if we saw some UFOs right now? No one would believe us. And we both started laughing somewhat uncontrollably. And we hit the ditch bank, and wasn't 15 minutes later, we saw our first UFO. We saw 7 or 8 of them. They're all classic saucer shape initially, cigar shape. They kept getting stranger and more cartoonish. One with a multicolored propeller. So we saw 7 or 8 of these things, and as we're describing them to each other, and we're seeing the same thing, you know. So either we were having a dual hallucinations or somehow influencing each other, or there's a lot of explanations for this crazy experience. So we got to the point on the ditch bank where we saw the last UFO, and that was a comet that came down and hung up in midair, then turned into the last UFO we saw. And then we turned around, walked back, and when we were almost to the point where we saw the first UFO, I missed one little point there. When we saw that first UFO, I was so taken aback, I fell to one knee. And so anyway, as we were almost to that point, you know, maybe 50 yards away, saw a beam of light come down from the sky, shining down where we saw that first UFO. The light was not emanating from anything we could see. And then that was it. That was the end of that experience.
Wow.
And as time passed, you know, initially I thought, yeah, man, we saw ETs. I was convinced. Then after a while, I wasn't so sure. My friend, after a while, became convinced we had seen ETs after initially not being sure what we saw. Now I don't know. I've over the years, I've entertained a wide array of theories of what we witnessed that night, and I think it was some type of experience going on inside our brains, you know, so to speak. But one thing to note is that, you know, before this whole thing experience started, I asked, what if we saw some UFOs right now? Nobody'd believe us. It was as if I had planted a seed of some sort. I often refer to it as like a magic ritual, but an unwitting magic ritual. We didn't know what we were doing. So I think it was a combination of that rapport I had with my buddy, some strong psychedelics, and just being open, you know.
Yeah, it was like our good friend Greg Bishop would say. It was kind of like a co-creation sort of thing going on there. Like you either willed it into existence, or you caught a glimpse of it by using the psychedelic. Like I love that stuff. I've never really dug into that, Adam. I hope to in the future with the show. Like, because I know there's a lot of studies going on now about how things like LSD or DMT can be used to try to communicate with non-human entities and stuff like that. But man, a conversation for another time. But thank you for sharing that. Chris, how did you tell us a little about yourself before we get to your contribution to the whole saucers and kooks and spooks and all that stuff? Did you have any history with UFOs prior to working with Adam on this? And what's your background?
Yeah, so you know, I had seen all the movies, ETs and Star Wars and alien films, and then I would be really interested in these like shows that were being played in the 90s, like Current Affair and Unsolved Mysteries and Sightings. And so I was really curious about the UFO thing, but, you know, very skeptical, like it's kind of maybe, you know, it's just, they're just trying to make entertainment. So, and then I was working doing tech support, and I met this guy, and he had just come back from this cult in like Georgia, and he was like, "Yeah, we saw UFOs coming down, and people were growing like 10 feet tall." And I was like, "Well, you know, what's a good book, or you know, what like turn me on to something that's really gonna, you know, get me on the right path?" And he busts out this "Behold a Pale Horse" book by Bill Cooper.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay, this is it, huh? And he's like, this is it, man. You're gonna be turned on for sure. So
that's a gateway for a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah, so that was my introduction into UFO researchers. But then over the years, I would like kind of get a little fed up with it, of just not really going anywhere. And so I would kind of back out of the scene, and then I would get interested and kind of like get back into it. But yeah, that's kind of a little my background with UFOs. But then it was after we were making the film that I had never really seen anything, but it was after we were making this film that I looked up in the sky one day, and there was like a plane that was coming out of a cloud. It was like a 747 or whatever. And but it was never fully coming out of the cloud. And it was like the cloud was enveloping this plane, and it was moving with the plane. It was like this weird magic cloud. And so yeah, it was very odd. And I just looked at it for a long time. It was like, what's happening? But
weird.
Yeah, that was
you've been initiated. Yeah, wow, man.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Wow. I definitely want to dig deeper into that, maybe with you off air here.
Sure.
But cool. All right. Well, let's start, with the book, Adam. Now, how did it come to be? Like when did it go from like, the kooks to the spooks? Like, for so long it had been the contactees, the witnesses. Like, this is a big part of ufology for so long. You go to these UFO conferences and it's people telling their UFO stories and alien abductions and all that stuff. And then it kind of shifted into this age of disinformation, which I find fascinating. And I know it's been there all along, and that's something I want to touch on too. But tell us kind of the inception of the book. What made you want to write this book at this time?
It really started with Tal Levesque when I met him. And boy, there's a big story there in itself. But Tal was a rather spooky character, a behind-the-scenes player who did a lot to influence, the paranormal field, ufology, these type of things. He had contacted me in, when was that, around 2007 or so. At that time, I was involved with the Central California Fortean group. So I think that's why he contacted me. I didn't know who he was at the time, but he said at that time he was working on putting together a TV series called Mysterious Mariposa, a mountain town that's nearby me, and if I had anything to share with him, He also said he had been an advisor, producer for an alien underground base episode of UFO Hunters. So, you get a lot of emails and stuff from people. You don't know if they're legit or not. I contacted Nancy Burns. I was writing for UFO Magazine that time, and she put me in touch with her husband, Bill Burns, from UFO Hunters. And I asked him, do you know this fellow? Is he legit? And he says, yes, he knows things, So I was intrigued. I did a breakfast with Tal, which I write about in the book, and he started unloading him and his partner John Rhodes, who you also may be aware of. telling me his whole history as a security guard at secret underground installations. And he mentioned how he'd been key in distributing the Dulce papers back in the day, in the late 1980s. And I asked him, how did he come to Mariposa? And he said he had gone there on a mission for Dan Aykroyd. I go, I didn't know quite how much to believe. And I said, he said, the mission he was performing for Dan Aykroyd was he was scoping out California to find a safe haven. And this was kind of based on the idea that we'd have the deluge eventually, and there's these different maps that have been made of what California will be like after the earth change, and one is that Mariposa will be an island. And so they had decided this was a possible safe haven. What Aykroyd wanted to do, according to Tal, was start a house of blues in Mariposa. And the idea that Tal is an expert, or a self-proclaimed expert, of the inner earth, and he talked about a limestone cavern that ran from the San Francisco Bay Area to Mariposa, and they would use that as a shuttle system that connects to a local rural airport to shuttle Dan and his crew to the House of Blues place. So I didn't know how much to believe in any of this, but I found over time that there was some kernel of truth to everything Tal told me, and that other people told me that, Aykroyd had been close friends with Peter Aykroyd, who was Dan's brother, and that Tal said he had worked on a show called Sci Factor back in the 90s that Dan produced in Canada there. So anyway, but so he helped release the Dulce papers, and that's something I started looking into, researching, and writing this article. It's going to be like a 10,000 word article called My Breakfast with Tal. But as I started looking into the Dulce papers, the Dulce base story, how they connected with initially Paul Bennewitz, and also they connected to the MJ-12 documents, I started putting this whole story together, and it got to a point where it's like, this is going to be more than an article, and started developing the book project, and worked on that for many, many years. And well, we can pause there for a second if you want to go in another direction.
I do want to dive into sort of the key players in it and everything like that. I think we'll dissect that when it comes to the documentary as well, Adam. What I'd love to know is Dave Perkins. Like, how did this come to be? I would say you are probably kind of the last to have Dave contribute to a book, and Chris, you're probably the last to have Dave contribute to a documentary. We lost him, unfortunately, a few years ago.
Yeah.
But how did you get him to write the foreword to the book? What was your working relationship with him as well? And tell us a little about him for our viewers, listeners. We got a lot of younger people who watch who may not even be familiar with him, if you don't mind.
Yeah, as far as some background on David, we've actually started a podcast, Saucer Spooks and Kooks, because we had a lot of outtakes and material from the film, and one's an extensive interview with David Perkins where he goes into his background. He was, in the late 60s, he was a political activist, rubbed elbows with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and those types. He talks about this in the interview we did with him. He is also an academic, and as a postgraduate, he taught a course on outsider literature. I forget what university he was at, but this was back east. And at one point, he felt he needed to expand his horizon, that the political activism and that whole movement had gone as far as it was going to go. And he became interested in communes, and he and his wife, who was a poetess, fact, she's written a book on this period of time called Her Fueno. We don't need to get in deeply into that, but they got a grant to go out to the West and visit different communes and talk to folks, and finally decided to move and live on a commune called Libre, which is the longest existing commune in the U.S. It's still active, and people basically homesteaded there, built their own homes, and so and it was a kind of a hippie, off the grid type thing. So that was David in the early 70s or so. They were living out there, and that's when he got interested in cattle mutilation research, when he happened upon a dead cow at one point, and over time he became the basically one of the people you could point to as a cattle mutilation expert back in the day. He was tapped pretty heavily by Linda Moulton Howe in her film Alien Harvest. Actually it was most of the Strange Harvest, excuse me. Yeah.
Right.
And it was a lot of the people that appeared in that, Perkins turned Linda Howe onto, all the ranchers and Gabe Valdez, and he shared with her all his files and whatnot. So that was kind of his background in cattle mutilations. I heard him as I was working on Saucer, Spooks and Kooks. I heard an interview he did on the Paracast, and it was probably 10 years ago or so, where he was talking about one of the key players in this story, Tom Adams, and his relationship with a proclaimed abductee, Krista Tilton. And a fascinating story. We don't need to get into that aspect of it, but I thought, I need to interview this guy. And I was to the point where I felt I was done with the book. I couldn't go any further. Then I contacted David, and it started a whole new round of research, and he turned me on to things. I interviewed him for hours and hours. And so that added another year to the book, but it also added a whole lot of information and his perspective. I got him to write the introduction, and a great guy. I miss him quite a bit.
Absolutely. I know he worked with Chris O'Brien as well.
Mhm.
And I had Chris on the show probably a few months before he passed. So we've lost a lot of good people in the
Yeah.
field as of late. So, I think this is a perfect time for their contributions to your work to now, make it out to even more people.
Mhm.
It's cool. It's cool. I'm so happy you brought up the Paracast too. It's funny. That's my comfort show, Adam. I actually put I go back to 2006. I start from the beginning, and I listen to the Paracast every night to go to sleep. It's like my
Oh, wow.
vibe. But yeah, good throwback there.
Mhm.
So, there's been so many books written on UFOs. I've got a ton of them behind me. There's thousands and thousands more out there. But none of them really touch on this topic of disinformation. So what kind of made you want to go down that route with this instead of kind of focusing just on the kooks aspect or anything
Mhm.
like that? What made you want to tackle this pretty prevalent and controversial side of ufology?
Well, as I started working on the book, I really don't think in those terms. I just kind of follow the story where it leads me, and it led, starting with Tal and this whole Dulce thing, looking into that, it led me to the Bennewitz affair, because, the whole, don't need necessarily get into all the mythos, but there was a story about the Dulce War and this underground base, and you could trace it back to the Paul Bennewitz affair, of course, which was loaded with all types of government disinformation when he was getting played by Richard Dodie and the like. So I just basically told the story as I saw it from that period, where Basically a lot of the tropes in ufology seem to come out of the Bennewitz affair and the disinformation that was sown by the likes of, once again, Dodie and other players involved in the story. And as time passed, when it got to the 80s or so with Tal Levesque, it was like another wave of this disinformation that started with and it was Tal involved in government disinformation. I don't know, but he interacted with the likes of John Lear and other characters that basically took the Bennewitz affair and turned it up, another notch to inform ufology as we know it. Once again, with all these tropes that really, a lot of them that started with Bennewitz, the underground alien base, the abductee, and Myrna Hansen, who had a implant in the base of her skull, and how cattle mutilations were involved in the field of UFO research. I'm not sure I answered your question, but I didn't specifically start with the idea I'm going to write a book about UFO disinformation. Just kind of happened. I owe it to David for the title Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks. I had some working titles, but it wasn't Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, but there was a line from the book about Spooks and Kooks, and David said, that's what you need to name that's what you need to title the book. Thus, it was expanded into Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks. Which has perfect, a ring to it. Yeah.
It really does. Absolutely. Well, that kind of brings us to Saucers, Kooks, and I'm getting it wrong. Let me say that again. That kind of brings us to Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, the documentary. So, Chris, that's where you come in, man.
Yeah.
How did that come to be? How did this project come to be from book to documentary?
I had been wanting to make a UFO film for a long time, and I was looking around, and I found Adam's book. A friend, turned me on to it, and I read it, and I saw like, oh, there's footage for this, there's footage for this, there's footage for that. Oh, there's the footage that I just saw in these other films, these Japanese documentaries of Tal. It was one of his only appearances on television, I think. But so it just made sense, and so I contacted Adam, and we started working on it. He got the plot points all down, and we got a big list of people to interview, and we went out to Albuquerque and Santa Fe and did the 3 big initial interviews with Norio Hayakawa and David Perkins and Greg Bishop, and from there it just started filling in the story, and so that's it.
Yeah. Now, Greg Bishop, I'd love to start there. A lot of people might be familiar with his book Project Beta, which covers the Bennewitz affair in depth, but I would like to kind of break that down a little bit. I know it's extremely convoluted, and there's a lot of players, which we'll talk about. But for any of our viewers and listeners who might not be familiar with the Bennewitz affair, Chris, would you mind giving us kind of your perspective of what that is, who that person was, and I guess kind of the Cliff Notes version of the Bennewitz affair?
Yeah, sure. He was a scientist that was. He had a company that was actually had military contracts doing like humidity, temperature gauges and stuff for whatever they were needed to do. But he had his business was like right on Kirtland Air Force Base, or like right off the border of it. And then he also lived, like 400 yards away from the air base. And so he was up late at night and would see these, strange objects flying around, and he started filming them. And he reported this to the base, and they sent Richard Dodie and a few other people got in contact with him, and just started helping him figure out what these things were and pushing him in the direction of, it's extraterrestrials, it's UFOs. And he was already into UFOs, and so I don't think that was a really hard sell for him. But that eventually led to like this big mythos being spread out into the larger UFO scene at the time, and then and a lot of disinformation and people like glomming onto the story and then making it their own, and it's like a game of telephone where the story morphs after a while, and it eventually led him to be hospitalized just because of his paranoia and how he was led to believe these things about aliens. So how'd I do? Was that a footnote? Good footnote?
Yeah. Adam, how would you grade Chris's version there?
I'll give him an 8 on a scale of 10.
Okay. Fair enough.
I don't think he was ready to do that, so I'm glad he did. I usually have to do this for interviews, and I look at different ways of telling it, then I get this sometimes. So it's so convoluted. You can get the timeline screwed up and how much detail you need to share. But yeah, I think Chris summed it up pretty well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's extremely convoluted, and I think it was manufactured to be that way, which is what a lot of the book and the documentary really dive into. I mean, disinformation, we all know at this point, is a tactic where it's kind of, a truth with two lies kind of sandwiched around it. And this is how it's worked for so long with this topic. And Chris, you did mention the name Rick Dodie, another name that some of our listeners will be familiar with, but a lot won't. So, Adam, would you mind kind of tell us who this character in ufology is, if you don't mind? Rick Dodie, his connection with Bennewitz, and who he worked for, I guess. Hey guys, Ryan Sprague here, host of Somewhere in the Skies. Very soon, we're going to be celebrating 2 very special milestones. One being the 10-year anniversary of the podcast. But not just that, we're also celebrating our 40th volume of witness accounts. And we want this to be the biggest, most powerful episode we've ever put together of witness accounts. Across the span of almost those 10 years, Witness Accounts has been built on one thing above all else: your UFO experiences. The moments that defy explanation, the encounters that stay with you long after they happen, the stories that deserve to be heard. And now we're opening the door wider than ever before. If you have had a UFO sighting, a close encounter, or any kind of unexplained experience, this is your chance to share it with the world. We are currently accepting both audio and video submissions, giving you the opportunity to tell your story in your own voice, in your own words, exactly as it happened. And if you're not sure where to start, don't worry. You can reach out to me personally, and I will walk you through everything together. This is more than just an episode. It's a collective record of real people having real encounters. By sharing your story, you're helping to break the silence, remove the stigma, and bring these conversations into the light. And who knows, when we start connecting these stories, detail by detail, we may even begin to find answers hiding within them. So, if you've been waiting for the right moment to come forward, this is it. Reach out to me through email or social media. Email address and links are in the show notes. We want you to take part in one of the most important Witness Accounts episodes we've ever recorded. Your story could be the one that resonates, the one that connects, the one that helps us all get a little closer to the truth, right here on Somewhere in the Skies. I hope to hear from you soon, and as always, keep looking up.
So yeah, Dodie was stationed out of Kirtland Air Force Base. Initially, he was like a security guard there, but got promoted as a special agent with Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and so he was part of the security there at Kirtland. Worked for a guy named Major Ernest Edwards, and so. Bill Moore is a part of this story connected to Dodie. So let's talk about William Moore for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
He was off the just written a book in 1980 with Charles Berlitz on the Roswell incident, and he was kind of an up-and-coming star in ufology during that period. Moore was also involved with APRO, Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, a UFO group out of Tucson, as was Bennewitz. So they had some connections there. So anyway, at one point, according to Moore's story, he was approached by a high-level intelligence agent. In some versions of the story, he says it was CIA. I've heard other versions were military intelligence, but was contacted, and he was given a deal if he would keep track, basically be an informant and keep track of different people in ufology. Then as part of that deal, they would share top secret UFO information with him. So he agreed to that deal. The concern during that period, at least according to the likes of Dodie, a lot of the folks in ufology during that period, like Bennewitz, were also civilian contractors. There was a bunch of guys, Ron Rieger, Lee Graham. These guys worked on parts of the stealth bomber project, and but they're also involved in ufology, so there was concerned about foreign spies getting to them and getting a hold of some of the secret classified information of projects they had worked on. And indeed, this was happening during that period, late 70s into the 80s, that you had Russian spies and Chinese spies, etc. And so Dodie became involved as like a proxy or middleman. Once again, according to the story, and they started using fake documents to disinform, or, for instance, if you had a kind of phony document about a secret project and you passed it to a ufologist, they could track who that document ended up with, see what foreign spies they're potentially interacting with. When they had approached Bill Moore with this offer, they buttered him up, saying, "You're one of the brightest stars in ufology." But really, according to Dodie in recent years, he said it wasn't so much the UFOs they were interested in; it was contacts that Moore had with in the Soviet Union with apparent spies, or at least people who were journalists, scientists. And so, anyway, at one point during all this story, Dodie was passing these documents, dodgy documents, through Moore. He had shown him Moore one document called the Aquarius, about the Aquarius project. It was a one-page document from a teletype. Moore looked at it, looked legit to him. And then a short time later, Dodie passed that document to him again, but it had been altered to add ETs into the document, and also something called Majestic 12. Dodie encouraged Moore to pass that to Paul Bennewitz with the idea that Bennewitz would see it and wave it in front of the press and be discredited. I missed one little aspect of the story is, about these secret projects they had going on at Kirtland. It dealt with like stealth technology and also satellite, spy satellite transmission. And, Bennewitz was trying to figure out what this was, decode the signals, etc. So that's another reason why they wanted to discredit him with pushing this UFO narrative on it. And like Chris said, Bennewitz already had quite a history with an interest in UFO research dating back to the mid 70s. Once again, he was involved with APRO and became interested in the cattle mutilation phenomena. So it didn't take too much to eventually push him over the edge.
That was the term I was going to use, Adam. Yeah, the fuel was already there. I think leave it to people like Dodie to put the fire on it. That's kind of, I think, what a lot of people don't really understand is that this wasn't like a guy driven to madness solely because of Richard Dodie and the likes of Richard Dodie. He already was, as maybe you would say, a kook to begin with, and kind of put him over the edge with all this stuff. Something I learned in the film, Chris, that I was somewhat aware of, but I wasn't sure if it had been confirmed or not. Maybe you guys can clarify this for me. Was the involvement of Project Blue Book's J. Allen Hynek in this quote unquote disinformation campaign when it came to Bennewitz? What was that all about? How did like the preeminent astronomer working with Project Blue Book, who would go on to like create his own UFO organization, he's kind of like this icon in the UFO field. What was his possible involvement with the whole Bennewitz affair?
Yeah, that's it is speculation, but according to Greg Bishop, who Bill Moore told him that he was having drinks with Hynek one night, and he told him that he had passed this computer on to Bennewitz, supposedly. So that's kind of where, that's where he comes into the story, but, it's hearsay from, two people removed. So
yeah,
who's to say? I mean, it does kind of check out in some ways that he would be there, because Bennewitz did say that he had met Hynek and he had showed him UFOs in his backyard, and Hynek had, told him 1 out of 40 people was being abducted, and just kind of surprising stuff that you wouldn't imagine Hynek to say. But, this is according to Bennewitz, straight from his mouth. So, it's interesting to think about. He was coming from Blue Book, and then he winds up into the story, and it could have just been Bill Moore like seeding, disinformation, but Greg Bishop seems to really think it was true. So we thought it was important to include in the film.
Yeah, it's weird, I guess it does make sense at that point. Hynek was working for the Air Force. He was on their payroll at that point. He's pretty much going to do it. Look at the whole swamp gas thing in Michigan. Like, they were telling him, go tell the public this. It was more of a publicity thing than it was actual UFO investigations, no matter what you think the stuff in Michigan was, or these other 701 cases that Blue Book eventually did not solve. It's interesting. I found that part of your film really compelling, because I was not aware of a lot of that. Bill Moore, this name keeps coming up, so I want to kind of rip the Band-Aid off on Bill Moore in terms of the MUFON, the infamous MUFON speech. Adam, do you maybe want to touch on that with us, kind of break down what the MUFON speech was about? You mentioned this deal kind of with the devil that Bill Moore had made. What was the MUFON speech, and what role did it play in all of this?
Yeah, it was 1989, and that's basically with this speech is when everybody really learned about the Bennewitz affair. I mean, he wasn't, people weren't really talking about Bennewitz prior to Bill Moore spilling the beans. People knew about him, researchers did. Linda Howe knew about him, and she was in the around 82 or 83 working on a documentary after the success of Strange Harvest. It was a documentary HBO tapped her to produce called, it was going to be called Alien Harvest. And so she was looking into the Bennewitz story as well as Cash Landrum, and that's where she met Richard Dodie, who gave her a secret briefing and passed on MJ-12 like documents, etc., and promised that he would share footage with her of a UFO landing. There was even talk about an alien in captivity, that there were video footage of. Eventually, they never came through. Dodie got shipped overseas, and that kind of undermined her HBO UFO documentary. So it's, you know, some people point to that as another more disinformation or underhanded tactics to kind of spin these stories. There was a lot of interest in the Cash Landrum. There was a lawsuit against the government by the witnesses of Cash Landrum that they had basically they had witnessed nuclear power ships and had been affected by the radiation, which caused cancer. Going down another rabbit hole. What I forgot the original question, right?
Well, what I get, that is a good setup, but what was kind of the premise of the Bill Moore speech at MUFON? Like, how did it get to that fever pitch where this guy finally came out and was literally like booed off the stage? Like, what was that all about?
So people had within ufology knew something was coming. You know, they didn't know exactly what. He basically laid it out that he had made this deal with the government. He didn't mention Richard Dodie at that time, but he talked about the Bennewitz story and how, you know, at this time he started getting John Lear and Linda Howe. They were pushing really the, you know, this next version of the Bennewitz story about that, how there's an alien invasion and an underground base, and there was these secret labs, and on and on and on. And you know, and once again, Moore didn't name Lear or Howe specifically, but that's who he was talking about that were spreading these new crazy stories. And he said it basically, this all came out of the Bennewitz affair. Now people are all being played as fools. And yeah, and people started screaming at him. Bill Cooper was there. What about the Constitution? What are you doing? What you did to Paul Bennewitz, etc. And, you know, they're ready to, a couple times, if you can find the video, you know, the MC had to step in and hush everybody down so Moore could continue with his speech. When it came to the question and answer period, he basically didn't take any questions. He had questions already dictated that he wrote up, and he answered those. That pissed people off all the more. Then he was done, and he took off, exited out the back door, and that was it. He was gone, left town, left Vegas, and basically left ufology, though he did make some cameo appearances over the years.
Yeah,
and you know, at that time, he said he was stating that he was going to write a book about all of this, but he never did.
Never happened. Yeah, it's interesting, and you guys do feature a good amount of the footage from that MUFON talk in the documentary, which, oof, man, it's just painful. It's painful to watch. It's painful to hear the story, Chris, that you tell in the doc about Stanton Friedman, like sitting there frozen,
Right.
dejected, shocked. Like, this guy had kind of built his whole life around Majestic 12, the Roswell case, and his colleague here is saying, "Yeah, I've been lying to all of you guys because I made this deal." I want to get into the doc a little more, but to kind of play off the Bill Moore thing, I'd love to know from both of you. I'm going to throw you a little curveball here. Would you have taken the deal that Bill Moore took, like, to further disinform the UFO community or anyone interested in all this stuff? Like, would you have taken this deal from the government if they had promised you the truth, even though they didn't give that to Bill Moore? They just told him more disinformation. Like, Adam, would you take the deal? I gotta know. I gotta know.
God, I've never really thought about that. I hope I wouldn't. Who knows?
Okay.
Depends on where my head was at any time. Now, was there really that type of deal, or was, this really something that project that Moore and Dodie were working on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but Chris, would you take the deal?
Well, if it was a real deal, then yeah, let's do it.
You do have to wonder, like, who
At
else
least
has
go
been
along
offered
for the ride. Yeah.
Right.
I
Right.
guess if I really believed these guys and they had, disclosure, the secret information about, maybe I would,
Chris, the doc. First of all, little gushing time. This documentary is amazing. Like, the aesthetics, the music, the
Awesome.
the editing, like, the story you tell only enhances the strong story that Adam originally wrote. But I have this burning question: was that set real? Like, Adam, was that your actual office? What that was amazing.
That was
the story behind that.
That was a set we put together.
Okay.
And it was based in part on John Lear and his office, with all the monitors and shit behind him. And also, the kind of the joke about the UFO researcher that lives with his parents down in his basement.
Yeah. We got quite a few of those. They're still kicking. They're still kicking. That's for sure. The kooks aspect. I want to touch on that. Now, I have a series here on Somewhere in the Skies called Witness Accounts. It's literally people just call in and tell their UFO stories. I'm not in the episodes. It's their stories in their own words, what they think it was. No influence outside of that. It's not an interview, blah, blah, blah. We're going on our 40th volume of that in the near future. And there has been a long history of actual UFO sightings. I mean, Adam, you've had one. Chris, you said you saw one after the doc, which is crazy. But
Yeah.
that touches on another aspect of the film as well, was the kooks. There was some humor in this, some levity too, which I think is very important. So what made you guys want to kind of cover that aspect? Like, I loved it. I love that sense of humor that you guys also had with what could be considered a very serious and disturbing topic.
Right.
Yeah, what was that conversation like coming between you two of, like, we got to get some humor in this thing?
Yeah, it's like, first of all, I want to say I don't really consider Bennewitz the kook of the story, even though he was, he was into UFOs and everything. I don't think that necessarily makes you the kook, but I would consider the kooks in the film more of the people that kind of took that story and made it their own, like Lear or Phil Schneider or Krista Tilton. Some of these, maybe not so much Bob Lazar, but some of the people that came after the fact. So, but yeah, it is such a dark story that, you know, like it's the military fucking with this guy. Sorry, I didn't know if I should concuss.
Absolutely. Fuck away, my man.
But yeah, and so, and the way Adam writes is, it's very humorous, you know, anyway, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to, like, I you know, it resonated with me, is because you don't get those kind of books in ufology like ever that I've seen. So yeah, I was like, I definitely wanted to keep that humor from the book into the film. So I think we managed to do it fairly well. So
were those your animations, by the way? I know that's kind of your experience, right? Your
yeah,
background.
a lot of that is my animations. I have a few animation buddies that help me out. So yeah, shout out to Chris Baldwin and Angelo Denali. But yeah, so it was a lot of fun to put into, you know, into the film. So
while we were working on the film, Chris was also working on Beavis and Butthead.
Oh
right.
my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, Beavis and Butthead do the universe, so it had like a cool Star Trek kind of thing to it. So
I'm so ready.
I don't think we ever said we need to make this humorous here. That, you know, it just kind of evolved that way.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite moments was when your character of Tell is going through the dumpster and then kind of sneaks away. That was, oh my God, I died laughing.
Well, I mean, that was Tal's real story, so
yeah,
we had to put it in.
Right. And the ending of the doc, obviously we're not going to give it away, but oh man, that's how you leave people wanting to further investigate this story.
Cool.
So
That's
well
hear.
done, guys. Yeah. Okay, let's move to modern day ufology. New York Times, Chris Mellon, Luis Elizondo, Pentagon. You cover this so well in the documentary. What made you guys really want to cover that whole thing, starting from like 2017, Tom DeLonge, and all of that? Why did you think it was important to cover those things?
I think it was one of the main things I wanted to do with the movie was, you know, take the old UFO lore and the old stories and, you know, put the new stuff in context of that, because there is a history of, you know, a long history of UFOs that kids don't know about, and they just come in fresh with Lou Elizondo or, you know, whatever story they're picking up on, and they don't know this big history. So it was really important to, you know, keep that all together, which UAPs is like this great way to like separate it from UFOs. So yeah, that was an important part to the film.
You know, we got to the point as we were putting this thing together, you know, there were so many threads that, you know, spread out from the Bennewitz affair. After a while, we had to step back, and, you know, I was pushing, well, let's just concentrate on basically telling the Bennewitz story. If we start bringing in all this other stuff, even the Elizondo recent UFO history, at first, you know, I felt, you know, that might be too much for the viewers to handle. But yeah, you know, even though I wrote about it in the book, that was kind of Chris' call to bring that in. I think, yeah, ultimately it worked out. If you remember the original 2017 New York Times story, part of it, you know, it was Elizondo coming out claiming to work on this program. But another element of that story was that in Las Vegas, Bigelow's group had modified their facilities there to analyze, what were they calling it, the special alloys or the metamaterials, etc. And that was part of the NYT story, but once again, Bigelow later denied that.
Yeah, he like literally had a warehouse built to even put a full craft in, and the legend goes that the CIA put a halt to that. The craft was on its way to Bigelow's warehouse, and they stopped, and that's being talked about today Adam, with Congress members going to these facilities now and knocking on the doors and being like, where's the UFOs? Like, we want to see the UFOs. We've had congressional hearings. David Grush came forward, said you have it. Where is it? That's where we're at today. And it's fascinating to me that like these stories keep coming back time and time again, and you can tie them to these Hal put-offs and the aviary and now we're getting the new version of that with all these newer intelligence people coming out too. I don't want to hit people over the head with like this cyclical nature of disinformation and in ufology, but I mean, it's clear that that's a message you guys wanted to get across. I think it's a message that we have to keep in mind every time a new revelation comes forward, a new congressional hearing is happening today. And yeah, again, I think like Steve Berg said in your interview with him, guys, like this is the perfect time for both of your projects, the book and the documentary. But what do you guys think about David Grush and his claims that he knows the people working on reverse engineered UFOs and kind of going back to the whole Bob Lazar thing in a way too? You guys mentioned his name. Everything old is new again. So what do you make of David Grush and all that stuff?
Before you want to go into David Grush, it's just like the algorithm. Just think about the algorithm that you're getting that's feeding you all your stuff you're getting into. That's Richard Dodie. It's not so much the person anymore. It's just like this continual algorithm of like, there might be seeds of truth in some of this stuff, but like just be really careful about what you're taking in, I would say. Regardless of who it is, if it's David Grush or whatever, but did you have a thought, Adam?
Probably lots, but yeah, I'm basically pretty dubious about Grush, for instance, that he rolled out the old crash retrieval claim, but he heard it from a secondhand source. And it's like, that's what was unloaded on Tom DeLonge, supposedly from General McCaslin, who's now missing. So
I was going to ask you guys about that.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? Yeah, 3 weeks now. This guy's been missing. Like,
it's pretty bizarre. I don't know.
Yeah. Weird. Very weird. And again, that's only going to add to this mythos.
Sure,
no matter. It's tragic no matter what. This man is missing. It's been over 3 weeks. Like, it's clearly something very probably bad has happened. I'm hoping for the best, expecting the worst, as we often do. But this will now become a part of the UFO narrative, no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's almost like Bennewitz. Like, he was a kind of a tragic example of what this disinformation can do. So I don't know where I stand on General McCaslin and what he knew, what he didn't know. If this has anything to do with his disappearance, probably not. But the question remains until the mystery is solved, I guess. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of going off on a tangent there. But apparently we're living in the age of disclosure, guys. There's a new documentary out literally called that. But Adam, you wrote about the age of Aquarius. And I think it's very important that we look back at that age and see, where it's led us up until today. So, I can't thank you guys enough for like doing this. It's so important. I've been doing this podcast now for almost 10 years, which is insane. I was once the young gun of ufology, as it were, and now I'm one of the old cynical guys. But you know what? That happens for a reason, and it's because you eventually get to a point where you start seeing these things repeat themselves. And I feel like that's where we are at this point. Is there any truth behind UFOs? That's kind of my last major question for you guys. Like, I think what you have laid out in the book and the documentary is a cautionary tale of what ufology can be, but is there a ufology on the other side of that? Is there a core mystery going on? Are there aliens? Are they interdimensional? Are they time travelers from the future? Like, what are your guys' personal thoughts on UFOs? Whoever wants to take that. I know that's a huge, sweeping question.
Man, yeah, that is a big one.
I go with time travelers.
Nice.
Yeah, time traveler. That's a good interdimensional. I've always liked, or like chaos magic kind of stuff. So,
well, that goes back to my psychedelic experience.
Yeah,
and
I would bet on that one the most, I think.
Yeah, and I didn't mention the theory that made the most sense to me was the John Keel super spectrum theory, where you enable to see through UFO windows, maybe what's always there. You need to enter that certain state of mind. Psychics are there. Meditation might bring you to that. And in other cases, these drugs like DMT or ketamine can open up that space where, maybe they're not from another planet. They're existing with us all the time. We're just not able to tune in to that super spectrum, as Kill referred to it, like tuning in a radio to a certain frequency to be able to observe these things. Anyway, that's a fun theory.
It is. It kind of reminds me of that. We got that big Steven Spielberg event movie coming out, the Disclosure Day. And just from the trailers, you're kind of getting this vibe that maybe they're dealing with that, like UFOs or aliens have been here with us all along. Maybe it's interdimensional. I'm very curious to see what they kind of go with in that film. Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting couple of years with Hollywood and UFOs for sure. And I would put what you guys have done with this documentary up there on the top shelf with these things, because I think people are going to be thoroughly impressed when they see the doc, and obviously when they read the book. So obvious last question before we go, guys. Where can we get the book? Where can we get the documentary? And what do you want people to take away from both of your respective projects and your work together? So Adam, I guess we'll start with you.
Where they can find the book and the movie, easy way, I like to direct people to the Substack we have for Saucers, Spooks and Kooks. I think Chris put a link for the book there and for the film, and we have a podcast too that
yeah.
And as far as what to take away from the film, I think you summed it up to people to be aware of UFO history and these recurring patterns. If you came into ufology in 2017, a lot of the folks who really became the UAP crowd didn't really know the history of the field, and so I would that's something I think people need to be aware of.
Yeah, it's like it's like UFOs versus UAP before New York Times, after New York Times. It's
really
just like
is
we're
like
living. It's crazy. The podcast. Yeah. Chris, tell us a little about the podcast and obviously what you hope people take away from the doc.
We went off in so many different places with filming, and so I probably have like 20 hours of footage that didn't make it into the film. And so we thought, just make a podcast and we'll put that stuff out like that. And, I think we've done 3 episodes so far, working on another one. And it's been really fun to like kind of not have the little sound bites of people, but like really open them up and let them have their full interview. So it's been really cool that way. But the website for the film is saucerspooksandkooks.vhx.tv. And yeah, just go check it out. And just remember, everything that you're seeing on the internet, just be cautious about, because we're getting to that place where, AI and all consensus reality is so, fraying at the edges or come apart completely. So, yeah, watch the film and take away from that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot recommend it enough. We will have links in the show notes to everything, guys. So be sure to check out the collective work of Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks. I always get it Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, not Saucers, Kooks, and Spooks. I guess they could be interchangeable, right?
Yeah.
I love
Why
it.
not?
I love it. But awesome. Adam, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today on Somewhere in the Skies.
Thank you for having us.
Somewhere in the Skies is part of the Somewhere podcast universe. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. To learn more about all of our shows, visit thespu.com.